Yo, Chance, I got a question.
All right, so module 39, biomass and solar energies and hydroelectric power. So as you can tell, this is probably going to be a bit, so lock on in. There's only 3 learning goals, but man, they are expansive. Explain positive and negative consequences of biomass energy sources. Describe the various types of solar energy systems. And explain how hydroelectric power is generated and describe its environmental effects. So for our first standard, biomass is biological material that has mass, commonly representing wood, charcoal, and animal manure. Okay? Liquid biomass fuels are ethanol and biodiesel. Okay, we just talked about that. Solid biomass can be wood or charcoal. Woody materials heated without oxygen so that water and other compounds can be driven off. Okay, so you guys actually live pretty close to a charcoal factory in Jeff City. There's one in Bell, Missouri, and Rolla, Missouri, which is not that far away. It used to be Kingsford, now it's Royal Oak. So that's why it's a little bit cheaper in this part of Missouri. Fun fact. What are they called? Yeah, they're like Tyndale, yeah, right? Yeah, okay. These resources are renewable if given enough time to replenish and regrow, and they're managed correctly. So they would be a depletable renewable resource, but they are renewable. Okay, they're not non-depletable. Moving trees too fast can lead to deforestation, soil erosion, and can harm species dependent on old growth forests. We talked about some of our ecosystem services that plants provide, trees included. So if you remove them too quickly, you lose a lot of those services. Okay, explain the positive and negative consequences of biomass energy resources. So air pollutants of wood and charcoal. So when you burn wood and charcoal, you get these compounds, particles, particulate matter, okay, otherwise known as soot. If you've ever seen a chimney sweep, they're always like depicted as being covered in like black dust, right? That's soot. Carbon monoxide is a color odorless gas that's formed during incomplete submission of most materials. Hopefully you have a carbon monoxide detector in your house or business. Yes?
So like carbon monoxide poisoning.
Yes, carbon monoxide poisoning, good. So carbon monoxide poisoning is weird because you won't even realize it's happening until it's already too late. You'll just sit there and die. That's why it's important to have carbon monoxide detectors, just as it's important to have fire detectors, smoke detectors. Okay, nitrogen oxide is a byproduct of combustion. Any fuel in the atmosphere, you also don't want to breathe that in. We already talked about VOCs, and of course you understand the issues with carbon dioxide. Yes?
What causes carbon monoxide to like make it chemicals?
Usually a gas leak. Yeah.
If you leave your car in the close garage.
Yeah, so that's like the suicide by your tailpipe sort of thing. It's not carbon dioxide, it's putting out carbon monoxide.
Like a family, if you hit it and all get popped.
Oh my god.
It's not wrong though. Like this time of year, you do see a lot more deaths because people forget to open their garage doors when they go and start in their cars and warm them up before they go places.
And they like just walk in and they die.
Well, it takes a few seconds, but yeah.
Yeah.
Carbon dioxide poisoning.
Yeah.
That's why it's good to leave it outside though.
Or like open
Or
garage
like
door
open
or
your
something.
garage door
Yeah,
with
Just
your
drive
car
on
on.
the car.
Yeah. Honestly, you really shouldn't let your car run too much before you drive. It's bad for your carburetor.
I don't sit on my bitch.
I love
And
mine
Mike is
for
stealing.
good 50.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, if wood is scarce, developing countries will use manure instead as fuel for indoor heating and cooking. Okay. Manure is cost-effective and accessible resource, but can release particulate matter, carbon dioxide, and other pollutants. This can exacerbate if burned indoors or poorly vented areas. So, talk to the person next to you. Tell them one pro, one con of using manure as a fuel source. Ready to go.
It's all bad.
Cost effective. And actually resource.
But it's no
But
bad.
it smells bad. Tell a lot of people.
There's no cameras.
So why do you say camera?
Okay. And good. Front table, give me one. Pro or con, it's up to you. What's one? It stinks potentially, okay?
What's the smell like?
Just depends on what animal you're using. Like, I'm sure like elephant manure probably doesn't smell that terrible.
What do you call it, Micah?
That shit's bad.
Okay, what is a benefit?
Cost effective.
Effective. Accessible.
It's free and accessible, right? It's,
Can you use our manure?
Yeah, that's all.
you probably couldn't because your manure is mostly water, so you wouldn't have a lot of fuel. You'd want to use like more of a herbivore because you're gonna have a lot of undigested cellulose, which is what's doing the burning.
Wait, so why is it like green and orange?
Talk to your doctor. I don't know.
I actually don't know.
So this is, speaking of death and carbon monoxide poisoning, using manure for fuel for your house and cooking is actually responsible for 3 million deaths a year in developing countries. So that's pretty crazy.
So don't use our manure to.
Or have it ventilated.
Dang.
Yeah. I think in Man vs. Wild, Bear Grylls uses poop all the time for fires. So, not his own poop, but poop times. Within a while.
You just pick it up and it's like, no.
Yeah.
So if he sees that, she
Okay, liquid biofuels are liquid fuels created from processed or refined biomass. Okay, there are two types of biofuels. One is biodiesel, which we just watched a video about. Okay, a diesel substitute produced by extracting and chemically altering oil from plants. And then we have ethanol. Ethanol is made by converting starches and sugars from plant materials into alcohol and CO2. Ethanol is the type of stuff that you drink. Well, you guys don't, hopefully, and I don't want to know if you do. And beers and alcohol, whiskey, wine, all that kind of stuff, that is ethanol alcohol. Okay, it's different than like hand sanitizer. It's a poison. Yep. Okay, the United States is the leading producer of ethanol. It's often mixed with gasoline, 1 ethanol and 9 gasoline, or called gasohol. So this is the stuff that you're putting in your car. So when you put stuff in your car, you have to pick which button, right?
The start button.
No, like E87, E85, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Unleaded, okay? So you're putting the cheapest stuff because it has more ethanol in it and less gas. So the more gas you actually have, the better fuel economy you probably get, but we mix a lot of ethanol in it. And so usually the more ethanol, the cheaper it is because the less efficiency you're getting.
So you're telling me if I put the 89 and the 87 is going to really get all my gas?
It should, but you can't switch back once you do it.
I already switched back.
That's bad for your engine.
Uh,
Okay, so it's considered more environmentally friendly since it does not release a fossil carbon. Ethanol is a modern carbon. When used as fuel, gasohol's efficiency is reduced and needs to be refueled more often, like in your car. When ethanol is made from corn, harvesting or growing corn also produces a large amount of fossil fuel energy. This can it's also caused food shortages through diversion of crops to be used for food such as corn or sugarcane. So you had an FRQ about this, and this is one of the disadvantages of using biofuel was that some of your food would not go towards the people; it would go towards making fuel for our vehicles. Okay. Biodiesel can serve as a direct substitute for petroleum-based diesel. Okay, so instead of throwing the petroleum in the diesel, you're just going to throw the ethanol in there. Okay, soybean oil, processed vegetable oil, and algae can be used for producing biodiesel. So algae can produce 15 to 300 times more fuel per hectare than regular crops. So more than soybeans, more than corn. Yes.
So with biodiesel be able to emit carbon monoxide, is there like a special container that they can, or a way that they can contain it from before it like releases it, I guess?
Contain the carbon monoxide?
Yeah.
No, I think it would just explode.
So then how, like, that lady earlier said that they buy the biodiesel or whatever.
I think you might be confused. So they're buying the used vegetable oil.
Yeah.
They're adding the chemicals and they're making biodiesel.
How do they contain that?
It's the same way that gas pumps do, I guess. It doesn't create the carbon monoxide until it's burned
Oh.
in your engine.
That's the part to
Okay, got it.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Okay, so then, like I said, algae can produce 15 to 300 times more than regular crops per hectare, which is pretty interesting. Biodiesel can emit carbon monoxide and takes more land to grow soybeans and corn. It can be carbon neutral since it doesn't use fossil fuel. It's easy to get spent cooking oil from restaurants. Okay. So if you have a diesel car, you could get biodiesel and put it in there right now, and it would work.
From where?
Not in this area; it's very popular, but like Southern California, a lot of those folks are rolling on alternative fuels. Pretty cool.
Like in cars too.
Like in cars too, yeah. Okay, energy. So we're on our second standard now. Thank God. Energy from the sun can be captured actively or passively. So you're gonna have a test question that's asking you about the two different types of solar system, active and passive. So energy availability varies depending on location. So like right now, your energy would probably not be very good. So you have passive solar, which is used to heat things from the sun. It takes advantage of solar radiation without active technology. Who has a pool in their backyard in the summer times? Just one person. Great. Okay. Do you ever put a bubble wrap on there, or like a tarp or anything? Well, during the summertime, like when you're not using it. No. Okay. Well, and with the own pool, I recommend getting a bubble wrap tarp because it's going to capture the sun's energy and make that pool water warm to the point where it might be too hot to get into, and it's really cheap to do that. Okay, that would be an example of passive. There are other examples of passive where you're using it for a water heater. Okay, passive solar can't be stored. It's literally just collecting sun's rays, and we were going to make solar ovens in here and try to cook s'mores, but snow days.
Aw, can
Yeah.
you do it anyway? Please. I live in eighth grade.
Positioning buildings and covering buildings to absorb as much solar heat as possible is considered passive. So we'll look at an example of that in a minute. And then a lot of the developed countries, they use solar ovens to cook their food or clean their water, etc. Okay. So this is a diagram that shows you where it would be the best idea to use solar, passive solar. So the lighter color you are, probably the better idea it is. So here in Missouri, probably doesn't make a lot of sense most of the year, but in the Southwest United States, that would be a great idea. It would save energy, right? Because you're not using any gas or fuel to light your ovens. Okay, then you have active solar energy. So that's probably what you think of when you think of solar energy in your head. Let's talk about solar panels. Use technology to capture the stores solar energy of sunlight with electrical equipment and devices. Solar heating systems, photovoltaic solar cells, and large-scale concentrating solar thermal systems are all forms of active solar energy. Solar heating systems can provide domestic hot water as well as heat swimming pools and homes. Really don't use a thing at the pool. That's pretty good. Okay, this is an example of a hot water system. So what's happening is the water is being circulated, okay, from the, it's going in, it's going up to this. This is a passive system, okay. It's being heated up by the sun and then going back into the water heater and then go out for your shower, dishes, whatever. Okay, so it's not using any technology other than the pump. Okay, so photovoltaic systems capture the energy from the sunlight not as heat, but they capture it as light energy. So it's not heating anything up. It's not catching the energy waves, it's catching the light waves. These cells are semiconductors, which uses silicon to generate low voltage electrical currents when exposed to direct sunlight. Solar panels on a roof can supply electricity to appliances or light directly to change or can charge batteries. So most of the time when you have solar, you have to have some sort of battery, or else it's a passive system more than likely. Okay. Many systems can send excess energy back to the electric company. And so a lot of solar systems, especially in this part of the United States, Ameren, who I think is most of our providers here, will actually pay you for your energy you don't use that you generate from your solar panels. So not necessarily just off the grid, but you're making money on it. Kind of cool. Off-the-grid homes may rely solely on solar cells as their source of electricity. So during the summer months, they're probably really good at storing energy. Winter months, you probably have to conserve energy a little bit. Not too many people use those in this part of the country. Okay, the effectiveness of solar, as you probably guessed, depends on their location and latitude and all that kind of stuff. Let's see. So this is an example of an active system. So the solar panel here is one that's taking the light energy. It's going to go down to an inverter, and then to your breaker box and to your outlets. A lot of people also will have batteries here to keep it for nighttime and for extended periods of like cloudy days, like right now, like past week. Okay, and then also you'll still want electric from your grid. That way, if your solar's not working, you're not without power. This would be an on-grid system. An off-grid system, you would just have a battery and you wouldn't be connected to the grid. Okay, so concentrating solar thermal systems, or it'll be called a CST on your test, are large-scale applications of solar energy to generate electricity. These use lenses or mirrors, tracking systems to focus the sunlight in a large area into a into a small beam. Okay, it generates heat's generated, boils water, produces steam to use similarly like a thermal power plant. So, don't have a picture of it, but we talked about how most of these power plants all look the same, right? They have to heat up the water produces steam, it turns a turbine, and then it goes from there. That's exactly what's happening here, but it's a bunch of mirrors, and they're taking the sunlight from like the desert, and they're concentrating it on a vat of water. It's boiling the water, turning into steam, turning the turbine and going. Everything's a turbine. I don't, like, 2023, we should figure this out by now. Okay. Anyways, on our third and last standard, hydroelectricity is electricity generated by kinetic energy of moving water. Okay, methods of hydroelectricity are water impoundment systems. That's probably what you think of in your head. Dams. Okay, like the Ozarks. Run-of-the-river systems are hydroelectricity, which is water retained by a low, small dam or no dam. And then tidal energy, okay, that comes from tide smacking into it. Okay, today in your switch on classroom, you'll see kind of how these work. So this is an example of like the Lake of the Ozarks, like 45 minutes away from here. So what happens, you have this reservoir and it's only letting in a certain amount of water through it. As the water goes through, it turns this turbine. Turbine generates electricity, it goes out to the grid. And then it comes down. What's the Bagnell Dam? That's what it's called. This is how Bagnell Dam works in your own state, 45 minutes away. Okay. Hydroelectricity is a renewable energy form in many countries. Dams are expensive to build, but just like nuclear energy, they don't take that. Well, never mind. That's not true. They're expensive to build, but once you build them, it doesn't take a whole lot of maintenance. It doesn't take any fossil fuels or anything like that, because they're just stopping and going. You're opening and closing a door. That's it. Okay. They don't create pollution. They don't create carbon dioxide or waste products. A dam can create recreational areas as well as downstream flood control. But they can also cause problems. Problems they cause. Okay, they're susceptible to drying up. So if the rain hasn't been as good that year, then you're not going to have as much water in your dam to keep providing electricity. It can hold water back, flooding areas and displacing people and animals. Typically, you lose a lot of oxygen because it's stagnant water. So low oxygen, high heat is good for a lot of parasites, including bacteria and mosquitoes, etc. Okay, so that's bad. Many fish species cannot travel across the dam without using fish ladders. And so, for example, like trout or salmon, they're not going to be able to go back upstream to reproduce after you put that dam in. Okay. Your book tends to drive home that cement uses a lot of carbon dioxide to make it, so that's like a problem. I don't really know about that, but the biggest issue that causes for the environment, though, is scintillation, and that is a vocab word you need for your test, or sediment moving from water that accumulate on the bottom of the reservoir. So what happens is it carries just a lot of that sediment with it as it's going through the turbine and it's moving it around. Another issue is like estuaries. So think about Louisiana, bottom parts of Texas. Estuaries are where freshwater and saltwater meet. If there is not a lot of freshwater coming into the estuary, what happens to the balance of the saltwater? It increases, right? And who do you think that's bad for? Yeah, the animals that live there, like alligators, crocodiles, fish, turtles. Okay, all those need certain parameters and they're gonna become too salty and they're not gonna be able to live there. Okay? Alright, that is your module 39. Questions, comments, concerns? Anybody still awake?
No.
Sweet.
No, very excited.